So I'm going to start recording. Perfect. First, we're going to start with a candidate's introduction. Each candidate will be given 1 minute's time to introduce themselves, their name, pronouns, Slate or Caucus affiliation, if any, and why they're running for the NPC. And we're going to start off with Sarah.
Hi, comrades. Forgive the background. I'm in the middle of a chapter visit in Eugene, Oregon. My name is Sarah Milner. I'm a trans woman and a rank and file letter carrier at the National Association of Letter Carriers, Branch 82. I'm running for NPC representing Reform and Revolution. I'm a member of Portland DSA. I'm running for NPC because I want to help build the strongest fighting, campaigning DSA to take advantage of the extraordinary political moment we're living in.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Andrew.
Hey, comrades. My name is Andrew Porter. I'm he, him in New York City. I'm on the Bread and Bros Slate. I'm running for NPC for a few reasons. One, I've been in DSA since about 2006, so I've seen the organization change a lot, and I'm really excited about where we are and kind of where we can go. I want to make sure that we not only know how to do the concrete organizing skills that we've taught so many people, but also that we have the ideological background to understand, what is socialism? How do we move forward as socialists? Kind of how do we what sort of analysis do we have in this current situation? So thanks for having me and look forward to talking more soon.
Great. Next up is Luisa.
Hey everybody, my name is Luisa, she, her pronouns. I am running for re-election on the MPC because, well, first off, I'm part of a slate called Springs of Revolution. But coming from a personal perspective, I believe that, certain voices are necessary on the MPC. I grew up poor. I was undocumented for 16 years in South Florida, actually. I come from a single parent household. First person in my family to graduate high school. So in my personal opinion, we need those kinds of perspectives in national leadership. I also have 15 years of organizing work from union organizing to immigrants' rights, of course, and internationalism, international solidarities with other socialist parties and movements across the world. And so I want to help build the organization, particularly because immigrants are under attack. We've always been under attack. But it's very much in the public narrative now.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was perfectly at time. I'll also make sure to mention everybody, Oscar is giving the warnings for time in the chat. So just be sure to keep an eye on that. I know it's a little hard sometimes, especially like when folks are mid-speaking. Next up, we have Joshua.
Yeah, hey comrades. My name is Josh Rusinov, he, him pronouns, North New Jersey chapter, but I am uncaucused. I'm running for the NPC because I believe that like right now in this moment, we have new opportunities to cultivate the seeds of real revolutionary change. But for us to do that, we need confident members of a DSA that provides a clear alternative to capitalism, a DSA that represents working class people because it's made up of and by working class people. That means developing a bold revolutionary vision for the future, not only in our material demands, but in the ways we seek to put power in the hands of everyday people. And we can do that through membership development, getting out there, being aggressive, being bold, and, being socialist. Thank you.
Great. Next up, we have Byron.
Thank you. My name is Byron Lopez. I use he, him pronouns from Orange County chapter of DSA, a co-founder of LSC, a Libertarian Socialist Caucus, and I am running for the NPC because, along with my two other comrades, C.S. Jackson and David Jenkins, in order to promote transparency, deliberative democracy, and and to help build out our dual power framework that we see as the avenue to finally rid ourselves of capitalism and defend our socialist movement against the predatory nature of the state.
Great. Next up is Cliff.
What's up, comrades? I'm Cliff Connolly, he, any pronouns, coming to you from Orlando in the so-called free state of Florida, the breeding ground of fascist repression where we get experimented on before things go to the national level. So simply put, I'm running for DSA's NPC because I think red state chapters like all of yours and mine need to be prioritized because we are on the front line of those repressive mechanisms. We need to get the resources that we require to build out security infrastructure, to build out voting rights campaigns, to do the mass work, go to the people, and let them know that we are the champions of democracy. The Florida Democratic Party is not going to save us. Working class people need to save ourselves, and DSA can absolutely be the center of that activity. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Jeremy.
Hey, comrades. I'm Jeremy, he, him. I'm here in New York City at a Brooklyn for Palestine rally, sort of helping out. So sorry if I'm in and out, but we have to cross the street in a few minutes. But gathering the masses here to protest the genocide in Gaza. I am a New York City DSA member. I was the co-chair of the chapter for several years, and a leader in our work in building a socialist in office committee and fighting for a free Palestine. And in our electoral campaigns of late, especially electing Zoran Mamdani for mayor. I'm running for NPC because it's basically my view that we're in a moment of tremendous opportunity for the American left and tremendous danger, opportunity in the sense of a deep disaffection with democratic elites, with all political elites, and a moment of great danger in the sense of rising fascism. I think our organization needs to be in the lead of building a large popular front to fight Trump and to advance socialist politics in this moment. We need to orient to the masses. I'm running with Socialist Majority. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Andrew.
Hi there. My name is Andrew D. Or Andrew Dye. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a member of the San Francisco chapter, and I'm running for NPC with fellow comrades from Red Star. All of us are running for NPC, and we all share the same attribute, which is that we've all been chapter co-chairs before, and our vision for the next 2 years of DSA involves having a national organization that spends a lot more time, effort, and resources investing in local chapters, allowing local chapters to connect more deeply with their local communities, and creating a national organization that stitches together all of our efforts and our struggles against capitalism. Thanks.
Last but not least, we have Ashik.
Hey comrades, my name is Ashik, he, him. I'm running for re-election for NPC and co-chair with the Groundwork Slate, and I'm running because I'm really convinced after 8 years of organizing DSA that the playbooks that we've developed in chapters all over the country can adapt to pretty much any population center in the country. Since I was a member in 2017, I joined when I was living in Washington, D.C., which is one of the largest chapters in the country. I was born and raised in South Brooklyn, and I've never been a member of New York City DSA, but I've seen, like from far away, the steps that they took to the point where they could elect an open socialist as mayor of the wealthiest city in the country. And yeah, at this point, I really feel like many of our chapters have enough confidence and enough internal democracy to set coherent strategies to lead as DSA with strong electoral programs, a deeper base in labor unions, so that other organizations with aligned goals can gravitate toward our power. I live now in Wilmington, North Carolina, which is a small chapter. I like to say it's the Florida of North Carolina. And there's just a lot that the conditions are increasingly the same, driven by capital, and we have the same playbooks that we can use all over the country to fight that.
Thank you very much. All right, thank you so much to our candidates. Our next part is going to be the facilitator-led Q&A for about an hour 15, if I'm not mistaken. After that point, there's going to be a audience Q&A. But let's get right into these questions. So we're going to be asking the candidates questions about DSA, our organizing conditions in South Florida, and their perspectives on such. Each candidate will be given 3 minutes to answer each question. Candidates will be given a 1-minute warning and will be cut off completely at the 3-minute mark. Our first question is, how should DSA members view Zoran's recent victory in New York City? What lessons can we draw from it and from his campaign? Should our orientation towards the founding of a working class party, one that's independent of the Democratic Party, be changed in light of arguably DSA's largest victory to date? And if so, how? And lastly, how does your orientation towards founding a workers' party differ, if at all, from that of other tendencies? For this one, we're going to be starting off with Ashik, and I'm going to put the rest of the speaking order in the chat right now. So yeah, we have first 3 minutes for Ashik.
Yeah, so I think that the reasons that Zoran won are not unique to New York City. It's an outcome of choices that New York City DSA made year after year for 8 years. Like they ran their first campaign in 2017. They experimented year after year, and that's what allowed them to win. It didn't come out of nowhere. They didn't just, get behind somebody with a nice platform. Zoran came out of their Socialist in Office blog that they spent a lot of hard work organizing. So I think that the lessons, like there's a lot that I think we need to unpack. Our, National Electoral Committee, like comrades are already looking into a lot of, like how to break down case studies. Leaders in New York City DS have been breaking down like their perspective about what led to a success. But my takeaway is really that those lessons, like the choices that they made year after year, can apply and adapt anywhere. That doesn't mean like I think every chapter should do exactly what they did in New York City, but I think the lessons that we can take away from it like apply anywhere. And I think that an electoral program is something that like we have to contest state power everywhere. That's just a core part of where power is in this country. That doesn't mean exclusively prioritizing electoral work, but in my experience in DSA, electoral campaigns are even stronger when they're intertwined with building our base long term through labor, tenant, community organizing. And our strongest electoral programs like really weave everything in. So, this is not unique to coastal cities like New York on the West Coast or the Midwest. DSA is helping win elections like in the South, in red states and purple states. We helped win seats in Atlanta, Georgia. Like Gabriel Sanchez is the first open socialist in Georgia state government in a district that used to be represented by Newt Gingrich, who helped lead the right-wing turn in the 90s in this country. In Louisville, Kentucky, that's another, red state. JP Leninger helped won in city council. So, there are many examples like I could give of where DSA's electoral program is succeeding. But the point is that we have to build socialists in office as blocks that will co-govern with DSA. And those are like mechanisms that we really, oh, Calderia team. Okay. That's a whole tangent that I would love to talk more about. That was New York City's DSA's first campaign, a Palestinian pastor in Bay Ridge, the neighborhood I grew up in Brooklyn, which is really conservative. Like growing up, I was like one of three brown kids in the class. Everybody else was like Irish or Italian Catholic. It was a pretty reactionary neighborhood. And it swung hugely for Zoran. And that didn't come out of nowhere. There are a lot of Palestinian and Arab immigrants in particular who organized. My family are Bangladeshi immigrants, which now number like tens of thousands of people in New York City. And that was a core part of the base that organized, like, through tenant and labor organizing that allowed them to show up at the polls as a bloc that had totally been discounted, ignored. A lot of monolingual speakers of Bangla, of Arabic, Spanish turned out for Zoran because the campaign prioritized it. So there's so many lessons learned that we have to unpack and that chapters can take on. Like this was the most multilingual campaign, the most internationalist electoral campaign DSA has ever run, I think. And there's a lot that can adapt. I think like, the whole red state, blue state divide, like we can really break down and get beyond.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jeremy, and I reposted the speaker order, and I'm going to repost the question as well.
Do you mind if I skip to the bottom? Sorry, I'm helping people process rate for this protest right now.
I see.
Okay, I got it. Okay.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. We'll go ahead and move you to the bottom of the order then, per your request. Joshua, would you be ready?
Yeah, 100%.
Sure. All right, sounds good.
Yeah, so I think the main lessons we can take from Zoran's campaign, sort of in line with what Ashik was saying earlier, is that we can win monumental strategic victories beyond what we even may believe that we're capable of. And these victories can only result from constant building of power across all avenues and the widening of our struggles beyond just elections. We can also learn that when we run cadre candidates who've spent years building inside of DSA, we can inspire not just our current members, but a whole new class of members who see a group committed to building a mass movement. In the years leading up to the Zoran campaign, DSA spent manpower, money, and time invested in the development of scaling campaigns in the New York City area, campaigns that tackled various economic, social, political issues across the city. These campaigns and any elections that took place in the meantime built our power to the point where we could take on an election that will most likely see Zoran take the position of mayor in New York City. It's these campaigns alongside the campaign that demonstrated our commitments to the policy positions and methods we maintain that resonate more with working class people than we could have foreseen, at least compared to people identifying DSA as a viable political player. Our mission is to build a political organization that, in order to achieve power, demonstrates trust. And what does that mean? That means that the same thing that you hear a DSA member say in a one-on-one is the same thing a DSA elected says in their position of power, both in what they're fighting for and how they're fighting for it. To do that, we need to separate from something like the Democratic Party that is, understandably and historically a racist capitalist institution, and we cannot build power as part of it forever. So I don't think that something independent of the Democratic Party needs to change in terms of our view in light of Zoran's victory, but it should inform how we're building to the position and the point in time where we take power away from our coalition, quote unquote, with the Democratic Party or as part of one. How does my orientation differ towards the founding of a working party as apart from other tendencies? I'm not 100% sure, I'll be honest, with what other tendencies believe in detail, but what I'll say is that we need something that people can trust, and that means building off of a solid foundation. That means building off of a foundation that's accountable to the membership that's building it, and that means building a socialist party outright and specifically, so that we're not shadow-handed or underhanded in the ways that we do so. And I'll yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Luisa.
Sure, thanks, Maria. So a couple things. For a victory like Zoran to be possible, you need very organized communities behind somebody like him, right? So I would say, we don't want to be prescriptive and say that you should never run candidates for office in an unfavorable terrain because of, local conditions can differ. But I think for most of the country, the vast majority of our work should focus on building unions and community organizations, coalitions, those types of things. And the reason I say that is because, Zoran hopefully will win, but I do think that I think the conversation and the energy that we have when an elected is about to win or when they do win is very, very different after they've been in office a couple of years, right? So for instance, Zoran has already said that he's not going to cut the police budget, right? For reasons that are obvious. I think those are things that we should take into consideration, even though we are excited. And I think, incrementally, materially, it is better for New York City to have somebody like Zoran. But I do believe that we need to think about the future and think about how to, how we as an organization are going to hold people, even people that we really, really like, accountable, right? And so that's part of the reason why I'm running on the Springs of Revolution slate to come up with this idea that, hey, maybe we should hold electeds accountable, right, to standards that we've collectively developed. And so, like I said before, I do think that these are two very different conversations. What happens when somebody's already in office? And I think we've learned lessons because of that. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have, sorry, I gotta scroll up a little. Andrew.
Yeah, I think that the Zoran campaign, and the recent huge bump in membership that we've seen, from the Trump getting elected and then getting that sustained through Zoran making the news shows is a very exciting moment, right? Most of the time DSA has seen membership increases and a lot of new energy. It's been through external events. Recruitment comes in waves in our organization, for better, I think for worse, right? We should move in a different direction, but that's been how it is. And those recruitment waves have been national, headline stuff, typically bad things that we're not really in control of, right? Like the first Trump election, second Trump election. Zoran getting elected is really exciting because it shows that we are capable of also creating those headlines, us being in control, being in the driver's seat, pushing that forward and bringing people in. I think that is a really inspiring and an important thing for us to reckon with, that we can also do these things, right? We're not necessarily subject just to the whims of terrible news events happening. That said, I think that the important things, I think some of the other folks that have already spoken before me already named to me, the important takeaways at this early stage, right? We haven't even, Zoran is not mayor yet. Fingers crossed that the next few months go well. But so we don't have the full story of what governing and things like that. But from this early stage, I think that I'll echo what folks have talked about, the importance of having strong relationships between chapters, where we're organizing, right? And then the electoral aspects of that flow downstream of that, right? This success is built on top of years of electoral organizing as well as community organizing, getting connections with the different groups that are living in different parts of the city, different interest groups, different community groups. And it's built on the back of that kind of organizing, not the election itself with a flashy social media strategy, which I do think helped a lot, but like that in and of itself is not enough. And so it's built on top of a long practice of organizing. Um, I'll say the other thing that will be interesting to see play out as well is that these when we go into office, governing will necessarily, I mean, within DSA, we have a lot of struggle. We have a lot of conflict, and this is not a bad thing, right? This is like where we sharpen our ideas, where we learn to work with each other. And this is doubly true for elected officials sitting in office. And so that's where we're going to see like these relationships and having a close collaborative relationship with the chapter, with the elected official, with folks that are out there organizing. That's where we're going to need to have that manifest.
Thank you. Next up is Byron.
Thank you. So on the first hand, of course, hurrah for New York City DSA and their victory with Mamdani. Hopefully, based on polling, hopefully he will be the next mayor of New York. But more broadly, when it comes to Mamdani's example, there is, as always, the anarchists are going to have a little bit of a critique and a little bit of warnings when it comes to putting too many eggs in one basket, specifically when it comes to electoral organizing that by the very basis of elections, you basically prioritize everything into a single individual, and that single individual, if they ever win state power, they're now part of the state, and they now have all of these different interests that are now acting upon them. It's not just us. But if Mamdani wins, he's going to have the ears of capital, the voices of capital whispering in his ear, and it's going to be up to everyone in DSA, not just New York City DSA, to basically do our level best to prevent anything from going wrong. So of course, what that means is very kind of up in the air. It shouldn't surprise anyone that the anarchists in DSA are far more interested in how we discipline our electeds, how we kind of work with them to ensure that they maintain at least a semblance of alignment with the broader DSA platform and kind of what we believe, kind of our ideological red lines, for example, Palestine and the Gaza genocide that's currently ongoing. And as we're kind of seeing with AOC and the whole back and forth on that, it is very important that we understand as well that, and we kind of realize this internally within LLC, because we have a couple members who are part of the Nevada DSA, the takeover Nevada Democratic Party by the Las Vegas DSA. A lot of them became anarchists because of that. Because when they took over, they beat. They did the thing that everyone wants to do, which is like take over a statewide Democratic Party. They looked inside and found there was nothing. The Democratic Party operatives within it basically took everything that wasn't nailed down and burned everything that was left. And that's kind of what we're seeing with Mamdani. The centrists are basically circling the wagons, refusing to endorse him. Active in certain cases when it comes to like centrist kind of Democratic Party aligned millionaires or billionaires, just actively trying to court Eric Adams, Silva, and Cuomo to kind of create this like evil centrist right-wing Voltron against Mamdani. And ultimately, because of that, because of all these kind of different things that we've kind of developed over the years, LSE does have a very heterodox position on this. But we do also understand that like elections will always follow organizing trends within DSA.
Thank you very much, comrade. All right, so the next one that we have up in our list here is Cliff. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so Zoran winning the primary proved that DSA's cadre candidate model works. When you have a mass organization throwing tons of people out there to knock on doors and hit the field, you can get elected, or at least win a primary, without doing what Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom have done, where you have to throw Palestine or trans people under the bus. We can still win without compromising our positions. And it's also proved that when one of our endorsed candidates tries to moderate a little bit or tack to the right on a particular issue, we can exercise democratic discipline to bring them back in line with us. So we saw this when Zoran started talking about how Israel has a right to exist. And through the efforts of rank and file DSA members and comrades in the Palestinian youth movement, we were able to reel him back in and explicitly clarify that he does not think that Israel should exist as an apartheid state, which of course is what it is. And so this is really core to Marxist Unity Group's orientation towards electoral politics. This is why we put forward Resolution 8, democratic discipline, to make censures, endorsements, etc., the decisions of chapter democracy. So I would love to see this vision of we need a Zoran everywhere happen. I do think we have to take into account a little bit how local conditions can differ. So like I'd love to see a bunch of Zorans running in Florida. However, my chapter in Orlando has already had canvassers held up at gunpoint for expressing solidarity with Palestine. So there definitely needs to be some consideration for security infrastructure. We've really been prioritizing that, getting people trained in de-escalation, stop the bleed, self-defense, firearm safety, and so on, trying to get as many people comfortable with that as possible so that we can keep each other and our endorsed electeds safe. I know that if I were to run, or if one of my chapter members was to run for a local organization, we would have Nazis come to our house. That's just a given. So I absolutely want to see Zorans everywhere. And I think we just need to calibrate a little bit to local conditions. In terms of how Mugg's position on a workers' party differs, I'll just say we want a mass-based socialist party. We do not want to be a faction of the Democratic Party. We do not want to be a junior partner in a broad popular front. We do not want to form a Labor Party like they have in the United Kingdom. We want a mass-based socialist party where millions of working class people are won over to socialism and intervene in US politics to seize state power, overthrow the Constitution, form a new republic that can actually implement socialism on a mass scale. So thank you.
Thank you, Cliff. Next up, we have Sarah.
Yeah, thank you so much, comrades. Let me know if I get a little bit choppy. So I think that it's easy to cheer on a win like Zoran's after the fact. Suddenly we're all cool with it. Everybody was on board. We think it was all great. But I do think it can be a little bit disorienting sometimes because there were a lot of comrades who had really intense criticism, and I'll put myself in this category, of the model of New York City DSA's approach. And now a lot of those criticisms have become a little less prominent in their messaging. So I think we should be clear that what we need is a strategy to advance Zorans and even beyond Zoran, but we need a plan to actually address the problems we're facing. However, if our analysis of the contradictions facing socialist organizers in electoral work paralyzes us and leaves us unable to take these opportunities, then we are not going to be able to replicate Zoran in practice, even if we want to in meetings like this. So a few things that I think were essential to Zoran's victory. Zoran didn't just run, he ran to win. And this is a big part of what galvanized people. The possibility of actually taking power. The idea that this was not merely an agitational campaign, but something that could profoundly impact their lives. In this campaign, New York City DSA managed to change the voter turnout in this primary through extensive campaigning, social network building, and a clear, concise message that changed the topics people thought were the most important in the campaign. New York City managed to create a demographic set of voters that was far more favorable to socialists. I think this demonstrates that if we replicate not just like trying to find cool people who are like Zoran, but building political machines like the one that put Zoran into power across the country, we will have the opportunity to win in places that it feels currently impossible to elect socialists. So how? Well, I think to take this enormous opportunity that's coming up as people turn against the major parties, we need to try to replicate the most effective parts of this political machine through things like trainings, materials. I think the NPC could, for example, hold public meetings open to all of our members to talk about what worked and maybe even some of the challenges Zoran ran into. Candidates and campaign managers should visit other chapters and talk about what worked and what didn't. And we should apply the resources of our staff to going out to our members and talking about how this machine was built. But we have to remember, even when we elect people like this, and I hope that we'll be willing to run not just a handful of Zoran-type candidates, but a full socialist slate running on a unified platform with unified branding. When we elect candidates like this, we are going against the capitalist state itself. And we aren't going to be able to get through that problem just by compromising or just by negotiating with other capitalists. And I'll wrap up here. What we need is a mass movement to actually push through the radical demands that are being put forward, even when we face resistance.
Thank you. Next up, we have Andrew, and then after that, Jeremy. But first, Andrew.
Right. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of things that come out of the Zoran victory. So first, I think it really shows that, people are fed up with the Dems. They're fed up with the sort of lackluster political options that they've been given. But I think as Sarah said, I think the push New York City did to move beyond kind of the people who are the typical audience for DSA and like the typical audience for DSA electeds went really well. Pushing beyond the people that are kind of like what sometimes called like the triple prime primary voters. So the people who vote, 3 times in the primary, but not only just focusing on them, but focusing on people outside, with the idea being that if we expand the electorate, we're more likely to get people involved. I think another lesson from Zoran's campaign is he had a very clear platform that spoke to the material interests of people. He identified clearly as a democratic socialist, and he did not back down on a lot of those issues. There were times where his messaging wasn't great, particularly around Palestine, but he came back around, and it wasn't like we've seen in other times where people kind of just backpedal themselves into making it look like they don't actually believe in anything. And I think that comes from him being a cadre candidate and being someone that is not only an elected that we had, but involved in the life of the chapter and is a committed DSA member. In terms of what we need to do for political parties, BNR is a proponent of the dirty break strategy. The idea being that we use the Democratic Party line until we can't anymore, either because they'll kick us off or we'll have built up enough, of a party infrastructure ourselves that we're able to break away from the Dems. This means that we do need to build a working class party, whether that's a Labor Party or a Socialist Party. We'll have to figure that out as it goes. But the Democratic Party is definitely not the place for us. That's one of the reasons we put forward 2 resolutions that help us move that process forward. The first is fighting back in the class war, preparing for May Day 2028, which should help us cohere left and labor forces together, and also unite labor and the left to run a socialist for president and build the party. Last thing I'll say is I think one of the things that comes up a lot with electoral issues is discipline of electeds. I think discipline is less important, honestly, than having correct expectations going in and having the electeds understand that they're a member of a party that's going to have democratic deliberation inside of that party, and that's how we want to make decisions rather than worrying about yelling at people further down the line. We'll talk about that more later. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next up, we have Jeremy.
Hey, comrade. Sorry, I had to go down there. I'm so proud of NYC DSA and honored to have played a part in building the political party, I think, really, that the chapter has become that could make this possible. I was one of the very first people that Zoran reached out to about his idea about running. And I'm so proud also of the SMC comrades who were in every level of the campaign leadership, from field leads to field coordinators to staging coordinators to the upper level staff. I think there's like a ton to learn from this campaign. and for us to keep chewing on as a left. For me, one of the main ideas, which I kind of started with, is like, how we get to be a party is we act like a party. And I think there's one of the great advances. I mean, another kind of joke I've had about this moment with Zoran is that like Bernie would have won with a solid organization and a great field plan, is sort of what Zoran proves. And I think like that's really important because I do think there's been some tendency since Bernie's campaigns that inspired so many of us to get more involved in the left, to take it more seriously, to jump into electoral politics, to kind of backpedal on some of Bernie's great insights, which were like, the Democratic ballot line is a field of struggle, not a sort of a given thing, that the American party system is kind of weak and falling apart in certain ways. And in other ways, the two-party system is very baked in. The only time there's been a displacement of one of the two major parties in recent historical memory, there was a civil war in this country. So using the Democratic Party ballot line as a field of struggle, building our own organization and its capacities to funnel masses into the movement and speaking to people outside of our organization at all times. One of the things we talk a lot about message discipline as being one of the great virtues of the campaign, and that's one of Zoran's talents, 100%, and his focus on a core economic platform that could kind of cross-cut some of the conservative stuff coming from the far right. But also, it's a message discipline that's constantly oriented outside to new people, to new workers. That's how 50,000 people get involved in a campaign. And I think our aim as an organization is to build structures that can absorb people, that they can feel like they're doing useful work, that they want to be there. The campaign was a joyous source of positivity. And I do think we as DSA, a third part of like acting like a party is disciplining ourselves a little bit, because our internal spaces can sometimes not feel that way. And we can sometimes not emphasize enough the importance of unity, of struggling together, yes, but also building a space that's welcoming, that brings in tons of people, that so many new comrades can get involved in and feel like, wow, my life is made meaningful by this work. To me, that's the Zoran difference, that beautiful campaign that was built. And I think we can do it all over the country.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you to all of the candidates. So our next question is going to concern ICE. Recently, Congress, as part of Trump's big, beautiful bill, approved more than $37 billion in annual funding for ICE, a figure which exceeds many military budgets like those of Brazil or Italy. How should we, as DSA members, respond to the growing presence of ICE in neighborhoods like ours in South Florida? What concrete steps should DSA take at a national level to fight back against this growing trend? And I'm going to start here by sending the speaker list and the question in the chat. I'm going to be sending them again sort of periodically, as we go along to make sure that it's fresh and everybody sees it. The first we have in the list is Byron, so please go ahead.
Thank you. This is something that those of us here in Southern California are dealing with, basically the tip of the spear on this issue. I myself am from Santa Ana, with one of the highest proportions of undocumented people in the country. This is something where it's affecting everybody. Like if you talk to anybody here, they know someone who's been taken, who's been disappeared, who's been deported. We don't know if they're going to be able to come back. Usually they've been able to come back after a couple weeks and with the right connections, but we're not sure of that anymore because we don't know if they're being let go. And ultimately, when it comes to immigration, this is one of the biggest things that we're currently doing in Orange County. It is our biggest committee right now, but it was something that we had begun the work of even before Trump really unleashed ICE on everybody. We understood, based off of his rhetoric and based off of his first term, that there was going to be a big increase. We just didn't know how bad it was going to be. It turned out to be really, really bad. But ultimately, we saw kind of a ladder of escalation, a ladder of kind of work that can be done and built up towards when it comes to defending our brothers and sisters and siblings in the undocumented community, including some of us who are undocumented in our chapter. First, starting off, which is the very simple fact that there's a lot of information. There's a lot of information that people do need to know and can kind of protect them to a certain degree. while the law, as it exists in the minds of liberals, is dying, it's still not fully dead yet. And there are protections that people can use to defend themselves. Thank God for the Fourth Amendment, and the ability to kind of block police and federal officials from getting to your house. But just going onto the neighborhood and just talking to people, canvassing, consistent canvassing, inform people that, hey, this is a thing that exists. Here's how you can protect yourself. And also, hey, we're DSA. We are in your neighborhood. And if things happen, you can call the OC Rep Response Network or your local Rep Response Network to get people to kind of help you out. We've been able to build out a very strong network with a lot of coalition allies to protect people. But ultimately, that's just a start. The next level is something that they're doing in LA, which is like just constant community patrols. And then there's the next obvious escalation from that I I may not be obliged to talk about, but you can assume what that means. And ultimately, this is something that is going to be affecting everybody. It's not just us in SoCal. It is increasingly happening in other states. And those of you who are seeing in Florida and now seeing with the alligator Auschwitz and the concentration camps that are now being built also in Jersey and other states. This is escalating, and we need to take real steps in building out dual power infrastructure to defend people.
Alrighty. Next up, we have Sarah.
ICE are our enemies. Not just the people actively working for them, but all of the people facilitating them, all of the people involved in the bureaucracy, all of the politicians voting for them, and that's not just Republicans. It includes people like those involved in the Biden administration who facilitated this, who ramped up and advanced Trump's policies from 2016, who set the stage for this. And I don't just want to beat ICE, and I don't just want to abolish ICE. I think we need to be pursuing the political annihilation of ICE and what it represents. We need to fight not just for abolition of ICE, but frankly for trials for the people who have led this agency and carried out these grotesque human rights abuses. People who are involved in this should be permanently removed from political power. It should be a black mark against your name that never goes away. So how can we fight for a movement that can achieve things like that when we're so much on the back foot right now? Well, I think it's important that we remember that we've seen that mass movements can fight back. What we saw with situations like Mahmoud Khalil is that as dangerous and frightening as this moment is, it is possible to build mass pressure and paralyze the government in their deportation regime and to free people. I think that we have seen in union organizing that labor organizers are on the front lines of the fight against immigration deportation. So in my local, we actually passed a resolution, my local reform caucus did, that would guarantee things like protections from members from ICE raids on our work site, warnings when ICE agents are checking, banning our managers from doing like these background citizen checks that are just designed to terrify and trap people, days off for people to sort out their citizenship registration. I think we also in DSA need to fight publicly with programmatic positions that commit us to not backing down, clearly advocating for the rights of immigrants and the abolition of this deportation system, not just in our tweets sometimes, but when we're campaigning. One of the best moments of Zoran's campaign was when he said he supports abolish ICE. When we're running candidates for office, when we're protesting, when we're forming coalitions. Other things I think we can do, I think our electoral officials can engage in non-compliance, stalling and refusing to enforce any of these illegal and immoral Trump administration policies. And lastly, I think it's vital that DSA actually be able to communicate these positions to the communities most affected, meaning we need translated materials, bilingual trainings for our members. I think we should consider hiring a staffer whose role is to whose role is to work primarily as a translator. And I think if we can do this, have an ambitious campaigning approach, clear programmatic positions, and communicate it to the people most affected, we will be able to help build up the mass movement that can abolish ICE.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Andrew.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to. I agree with a lot of what Sarah said. I agree with a lot of what Byron said. I think locally, chapters need to look and work with other organizations, figure out what's the most strategic thing to do in your area in terms of protecting people. I think this is a question that the answer is going to change a lot in terms of like what we're doing day to day. But at the root of it, I think as Sarah was saying, we need to be campaigning in order to, one, make ICE like a black mark on anyone who's involved. We need to be campaigning and educating people on immigration as well. One of the kind of interesting things that happened during the one of the detentions that were happening was, the Democrats started to push back against it. They started to fight, and then suddenly, the appeal and the approval of Trump's immigration plans dropped. And then once they decided that, oh, actually, we're going to let this go, the approval for the immigration plans went back up. Like, this is an issue that's been manufactured in a lot of ways, and part of the problem is the Democrats have been so willing to just give up on it that there hasn't been any alternative message besides the one the Republicans are putting forward. So I think nationally, we can provide a clearinghouse for information. We can have trainings that all chapters can go to, which will be really important. And then, we can also help to coordinate work with people who are in unions in order to make sure that those unions are taking the right side on this issue. If we are able to get unions to be on the right side of this, they're one of the places that we have power and are able to actually exert control, beyond our electeds. I think that's one of the best ways that we could work on that. But yeah, like, I think locally people are gonna have to find organizations that are doing good work, coordinate with them. What that will look like will probably change. Nationally, we should have trainings, information, pushing the idea that this is not the issue that Trump says it is. These are people who are coming here mostly because of our own imperialism, educating people about that. And then finally, like, coordinating the work within unions in order to make sure that they're on the right side of this issue. So, thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Luisa.
Thanks, Maria. So this is obviously an issue that is near and dear to my heart. So as part of the Slate, I helped co-author Art 26. Right now it's on the consent agenda. So link to my website in a summary of the resolution. It actually does offer a full vision in terms of state repression in ICE. And so in it, you guys are more than welcome to read. But the difference is that, when Trump got elected the first time, there wasn't really, and I want to be gentle here because I don't want to criticize past leaders too much, but DSA did not prioritize immigration in that time, right? And now there just wasn't the leadership for it. I will say this time around, you have 2 NPC members who are immigrants, and part of the Slate, or 3 out of 5 are immigrants. And so this is kind of an issue that we cannot avoid. In terms of response, Florida is terrible when it comes to immigration, despite it being a Black and brown state, right? Years and years of voter disenfranchisement has led to that. It has led to the legislature that Florida has. And so I will say, KYRs are absolutely important. I love doing them. I've done many. In terms of actually stopping immigration, having people understand what their rights are is very important. Another thing, when you have so many 287G agreements, something like criminalization, which is the intersection of criminal law and immigration, becomes very important, right? And so when I was undocumented, I had to take the world's worst public transportation system that exists in Florida. Anybody who's tried to write it understands. And so one way of mitigating the impact of ICE is making sure that we're not forcing people to drive, which is very, very difficult in South Florida. It is a region of the United States made for cars. Most states have terrible public transportation systems, but that's one way we can effectively help. Another thing would be having consular visits. I know municipal IDs have been outlawed because Florida, I believe, is a stop in ID law, making sure that people have ID. My only form of ID was my Chilean passport when I was undocumented. So little things like that, and these are things that the organization can help facilitate. And I'm talking beyond what we've discussed in our 26. These are the things that we can take, the kind of strategies that we can take. Also, I will say, lastly, that ISIS 22 years old, it can barely drink if it were to go to a bar, right? So it really lands on us as socialists to make sure that we push this narrative that ICE does not have to exist, because it absolutely does not. And we can't rely on NGOs to push more aggressive strategies, aggressive narratives, right? When it comes to an anti-imperialism, and when it comes to illegal sanctions, and when it comes to war and 600 to 800 military bases across the world, but we can do that, and that's our responsibility as socialists to do so.
Thank you very much. Next up is Jeremy.
Yeah, great question. ICE is the Gestapo of our time, and the Trump administration is using it in that way, and it's been a cancer on this country and should definitely be eliminated. I helped author a resolution from Palestine and Mexico on the broad way in which we have to do defensive to ultimately offensive strikes against the administration. I'll bump it in the chat after I'm done talking. I think one thing to understand is that the Trump administration is going after the parts of the working class that they think are most vulnerable and isolable from the working class as a whole. So they're going after students and Palestine protesters. They're going after immigrants. They're going after federal bureaucrats who they think they can isolate from the class as a whole to increase their reach, increase their power, and then use those weapons against the class as a whole. That's an analysis we can have as socialists, but one that's not necessarily intuitive to the whole working class. And so that we need to be sharing and propagandizing around. Some of how we do that is through our actions. As people have said, know your rights trainings, court watch, getting elected officials involved in court watch. Elected officials also, I'll say, have a lot of ability to produce multilingual materials that are extremely useful. Have worked with multiple elected offices to get materials in English and Spanish and Bangla and Chinese and so many languages to protect our immigrant siblings in the city. I was politicized in DSA. I have to differ here a bit from Luisa. I was politicized in DSA by my very first DSA action was the big protest at JFK 8 in 2017. I am so proud of our long-term leadership in the struggle against ICE and of the work we have done. I think the trouble and the difficulty is that, the American working class, classically in America, is extremely divided. And what we were not able to figure out exactly is how to build the sort of long-term structures that bring working class people together and make them not see their lives as a zero-sum game. I do think I experienced knocking on doors for some of our candidates, working class people of color who were like, the immigrants are taking all our resources. My life was so hard. Why should I have to give, hotel rooms to those immigrants? The level of propagandizing and confusion that our mass media, our corporate media spreads is for real. So I do think the ultimate, besides our defensive fights now, the ultimate horizon of our fights has to be how do we do big fights that unify the working class and that pull away people who are attracted, initially brought into the Trump and fascist psychosis. Some of that, and a huge important part of that, is through our labor unions, as has been mentioned. And I do think important struggles like fights against Medicaid cuts, where working people who voted for Trump can be like, he betrayed me. Actually, immigrants are more like me, are the front lines of our struggle for the long-term change we need.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ashik.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about like an interview I did recently with C-SPAN, which has like a call-in section where just random people around the country can call in with questions. And I was supposed to talk about Zoran and DSA's growth, but of all the questions, like so many of them were just like so anti-immigrant. It was kind of shocking to me because I'm mostly talking to people on the left, people who agree we should abolish ICE, we should have open borders. But just the string of like hatred, like so many people were just like, oh yeah, Zoran's policies are good, and I agree with them, but it's bad that he's not against immigrants enough. So it just really showed me like how much work we have to do, like as DSA, as people on the left, to propagandize. I really agree with something that Sarah said, like Sarah, who's our current one of our current comms chairs, who like sees what the gaps are in our communications right now. We're really punching below our weight at the national level of our communications. We need to do way more. I agree we should expand like staff, including like translation capacity. There are just so many things we could do to just put out our message and just reframe like constantly. Like Zoran was really good at this. He was laser focused on these cost of living demands, and that allowed him to defend people against ICE, to talk about, just the basic rights of immigrants. I think we should learn a lot from what DSA Los Angeles chapter has been doing. That's the second largest chapter of the country. They're already well organized enough in core capacities to be able to respond very decisively when LA has been under siege from ICE raids since June. And because they had a block of socialists in office, people like Eunice Hernandez has a whole like direct action like mutual aid project in MacArthur Park, which has become a focal point of just the entire right-wing media to talk about the failures of socialist left and scapegoating immigrants. They're responding on the ground in all these ways, including know your rights canvassing like week after week. They're showing up at protest rallies. They're able to respond when like David Huerta, the president of SEIU California, a statewide genders union, was attacked and detained by ICE, and DSALA was a core part of the groups showing up day after day in protest until he was released. So, they're able to lead in this moment, and there's a lot that we need to unpack and, put out to all DSA chapters to learn from, because they're moving on now from LA to cities all over the country. So I think what LA has been able to do, the DSA members there over the past 2 months, like there are just so many lessons learned in real time that we need to apply. And I'll also say many DSA chapters have been leading on migrant justice since I joined in 2017. I was in the Metro DC chapter, which showed up in a huge way for migrant justice under the first Trump administration. Comrades of mine led direct actions publicly confronting architects of the ICE regime. They led to Kristen Nielsen resigning as Secretary of Homeland Security. If you remember, there was a viral moment of them confronting her at a restaurant, and that actually led to a huge membership spike for DSA. That again, we led based on something our members did. So yeah, like I agree. Trump administration's response is disorganized and unpopular. I totally agree with what Luisa said about just reminding people how new ICE is. I used to do research on the military budget or militarized budget, and just that's constantly something we would hammer. Like this was created like very recently. It can be undone, and we need to organize for that.
Right. Thank you. Next up, we have Cliff.
We got to put politics in command. So that means, echoing what many others have said, we need to be very clear in our communications, in our expectations with electeds, and everywhere that our demand is to abolish ICE, demilitarize the border, defend freedom of movement for migrants, and fight for their political freedoms, crucially. So, like I mentioned earlier, Mug has put forward the Democracy for All campaign, which would explicitly say DSA stands for non-citizen residents of the United States getting a vote at every level of our electoral system, making it clear that we actually believe in democracy and are willing to put our money where our mouth is. I think this is also an excellent political intervention that we can make in the labor movement. We've put forward an amendment to the NLC resolution called a partyist labor strategy, which would task our National Labor Commission with helping DSA members, in particular unions, develop sample resolutions to push in those unions. And a great example is United Electrical Worker passed a resolution at their 2023 convention committing their locals to conducting Know Your Rights trainings, fighting for contract language that forbid their employers from working with ICE, et cetera. Those are the kinds of interventions we need to be making at every level of our work, not just when we're working with, local immigrant coalitions or fighting for sanctuary city resolutions. Those things are all important, but labor, mutual aid, every avenue, we need to be centering immigrant justice. And I like a lot of the resolutions that have been put forward. I think R26 was the one that Luisa had mentioned. I'm supportive of that. So we've got a lot of great ideas here at the national level. Ultimately, however, local chapters are the ones that are going to do this work. So I think there's really two main areas where that's going to be done. Number one is collaborating with local immigrant justice coalitions that are conducting ICE Watch operations and other things like that. We need to be part of that movement. But we also really just need to do a better job of connecting with immigrant communities in a lot of our chapters. something we've done in Orlando is we've centered our recruitment drive on majority Black and Brown, mostly majority immigrant neighborhoods like Sanford and Pine Hills. Our approach is we're doing a break light clinic, a cookout, and a DSA 101 in each of those communities, just trying to build more of a connection and actually, being part of those communities as opposed to, some of the wider areas where our chapter has historically done better with recruitment. We need to change that so that DSA actually reflects the demographics of the class that we seek to organize. So again, very supportive of a lot that's been said here. I don't think that there's really a ton of political difference on this question, but certainly I'm looking forward to seeing the debates that we have about it at convention and finding some unity and fighting ICE together.
Thank you, Cliff. Next up, we have Andrew.
Yeah, I think it's funny. Cliff and I have appeared on or I think a bunch of us have appeared on a bunch of these panels, and there was one time where, just like now, Cliff just ripped my answer straight from me, just like scooping me right before. Yeah, I was just going to reiterate on like a portion, like those questions, like what should DSA members be doing to respond to these things, and what can National do, right? I think that, like I was saying before, so much of this work, the vast majority of all organizing at DSA happens at the chapter level. This work is no different, right? Like what this is going to look like, how to respond to ICE is, for the most part, I think, going to take the like manifest as chapter members getting out in the street, opposing ICE, doing the ICE Watch things, doing Know Your Rights canvases. All these things happen in local communities, and I think that like this is, I mean, not just something that we should do because it's good, but also that it's an opportunity for us, right? Like what Cliff was just talking about, it's an opportunity for us to demonstrate in this moment of like folks getting radicalized, as a moment of like heightened tensions. It's an opportunity for us to demonstrate our values, put our money where our mouth is, and actually organize on the front lines. We can use this opportunity to go and meet people in neighborhoods where this is happening, often in places that are far less white, lower income, higher immigrant populations than DSA's normal demographics. And I think that that is our imperative, right? We have to be doing that. The national organization, I think, can do a lot better, or not, like just do much more to facilitate these connections, right? So what that means, I think, is like at a basic level, providing training. Some of this stuff already happens with like providing trainings, workshops, whatever, for chapters to be able to engage in this work, but also create a network and a coordination effort between chapters where these efforts are, these organizing efforts are not like, okay, what's happening in South Florida is different from what's happening in San Francisco, right? It's the same exact thing. Like my chapter, every Tuesday, we are working in a coalition where there's tons of folks showing up to the courthouse, and that's like almost entirely stopped ICE deportations from happening at the courthouse on Tuesdays. So like this kind of stuff should be coordinated across chapters. I'll also just quickly touch on that. I think that this is why it's so important to center an anti-imperialist lens in our organizing. This moment of rupture is an opportunity for us to meet people where they're at, where people are looking. Folks from all across the political spectrum see this happening, and at least some of them think that it's really messed up, right? They think that like, oh, this is really wrong, this is really unjust, this is really like, their like understandings of liberal democracy are falling apart, and this is an opportunity for us to meet them there and guide them in that radicalization process, connecting this internal like domestic fascist force with the same thing that's happening abroad, right? ICE and bombing brown people in the Middle East is like a bipartisan project, and we should be pointing at that, naming that, and bringing them folks into the solution, which is building DSA and organizing for socialism.
All right, thank you very much. Finally, on this question, we have Joshua.
Yeah, thank you so much. Tough to go after so many great organizers on this question. But as members of DSA, it's our job to organize solidarity between all people. We could see that many groups support and protect the rights of immigrants, but it's impossible not to see that a non-insignificant amount of working people and organizations see immigrants as a threat to their employment or economic position in America. And it's our job to seriously address this in areas like our workplaces and unapologetically take a stand against the further mistreatment of immigrants on the shop floor, in our communities, and in our existing union structures. But we got to fight back in a proactive way and push for the expansion of the rights of immigrants in the face of renewed attacks, instead of simply reacting instead of simply reacting to further attacks on immigrants or opposing proposed legislation targeting members of our communities, we got to be going on the offensive, proposing new legislation that enshrines the rights of immigrants and undocumented folks, working to ban the possibility of any new ICE contracts with prisons or the construction of any new detention centers before we even know that any have been announced. We should be ready to put ourselves forward to stand beside our immigrant communities. We're not heroes. The people got to liberate themselves, but we got to be willing to help uplift this work by inspiring our communities to engage in it with us. By building forward in the face of anti-immigrant aggression, we can begin to inspire others to stand firm. That includes putting more effort into organizing immigrants and bringing them into all facets of the movement by showing them they're not alone in this fight. We got to be working actively to make sure that when we're at the point that workers and others associate our movement with improved conditions for all, the word all includes immigrants. Our biggest tool during this time of growing anti-sentiment is to build connections between all elements of the working class, connect them to immigrant support networks, and demonstrate that we all stand together. We should take this moment to challenge the anti-immigrant ideals that penetrate our labor unions and other institutions by confronting them directly and publicly. While the issue's fresh on people's mind, the best chance we have is to rally mass support among the rank and file and turn our labor unions into strongholds that defend the rights of immigrants just the same as they would for any of their workers. Aside from material support, we could provide in terms of resources to engage in direct action against ICE, which we should do and should prioritize. One of the other biggest tools we have at the national level is our commitment to a unified voice. We can work on the ground to build trust with each and every person, but that trust and collaboration can only flourish if we show that we are a movement larger than anything you could find locally and with real people power behind it that's committed to the same exact ideas we're promoting on the ground. We can build local energy and fervor, but it's going to be DSA as a whole that can connect these local struggles together to larger demands and a larger movement that involves all people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much, candidates. So this is our final question of the facilitator-led part of the Q&A before we move into audience questions. So yeah, let me just read it here. Our final question concerns organizing undocumented immigrants. Historically, DSA has overwhelmingly consisted of organizers with resident or citizen status. Often, though not exclusively, because of the legal risks many undocumented people face when engaging in organizing. Beyond this, what other key barriers do you see do you see preventing DSA from organizing within undocumented communities? And what can we as an organization do to overcome them? Yeah, so it appears, just I guess for clarity then, that the previous question was dealing with like response to ICE and to deportations, whereas this one is more focused on specifically organizing undocumented communities, particularly into DSA. Yeah, there's a bit of overlap there. Apologies for that. I hadn't seen the question in advance. But if comrades still feel like they have things they'd want to say on this, we do have this question here. Yeah, so the first person in the order that we have here is Andrew. I just typed everything out in the chat, all the list of people. So yeah, please feel free to go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'll try to add on rather than, repeating too much of what's already been said on this topic. But I think that so organizing in our role, like as socialists, organizing against capitalism, organizing for a better world it always entails some kind of risk, right? But this risk is not uniform across everyone that's involved. It's the same way that exploitation, there's like a racialized hierarchy of exploitation in this country that, we've already been talking about. This also applies and manifests in organizing risk in people's undocumented status and things like that. So like that's always going to be something we're fighting against on this, in our work. I was going to say, I think that there are basic table stakes things that we already do and we can invest more in, which are basic, practical privacy, operational security kind of stuff, really emphasizing that we need to protect our member roles and things like that. But that doesn't necessarily bring people in, right? As much as it's our duty to do that just as good organizers and protect people that are already with us. I think what the thing that we can be doing to actually bring people in is doing more of this like front line, like demonstrating solidarity where people are being stolen from their homes, where people are being disappeared, where that like real fear is being like manifested by the state, right? What DSA can and must do is like become more appealing to at-risk communities because I'm not going to pretend to say that we can eliminate the risk for anyone. Like, we're not in a position to be able to be like, oh no, it actually is totally safe and fine for you to do this, and we've like evened the playing field. So we did, we would have already won. And so the work that we have to be doing is to be building these like relationships, whether it's organization to organization, organization to community, and it also as individuals, as individual members of DSA. And our work needs to be oriented in that direction. I think that means having chapters being more deeply ingrained in their communities and specifically like not just the people that are already politicized, people that are already politically active, people that already vote and things like that, but finding the places where the system has ignored people, has oppressed people, and things like that. Let me see if yeah, I think I'll call it there.
All right, thank you. Next up, we have Byron.
Yeah, when it comes to how do we defend these communities and kind of really working to get people on board, it is very difficult with undocumented folks because of the sheer fact that, they can be deported. For us, for those of us who are citizens, we may see some jail time, but at least we'll still be in the States. For those who do not have citizenship, both undocumented and now kind of looking like those who just have residency, we're talking deportation. Like, you're not even going to be physically in the boundaries of the United States. Sometimes you're not even getting sent to your country of origin. You're getting sent somewhere else. Eritrea, Sudan, South Sudan. Like, you never know where you're going to end up, and that's horrifying. And that is a real risk that people in the undocumented community who do keep up on the news, whether it's through traditional media like Univision or TV Azteca, or through more kind of social media like Facebook or TikTok, they know this. I know because I talk to them. I talk to my neighbors. You reach out to people online, and ultimately because of that, like, we as both citizens and residents and also undocumented organizers, we have to really kind of put our body on the wheel in order to kind of let people understand that we are actually serious about this, because there is like a very long tradition of kind of liberal NGOs coming into undocumented communities sometimes, saying a lot of things, but when it really comes down to it, like, they don't really show up. They browbeat. They say, "Oh, like you're doing it wrong," and ultimately that really takes people off and kind of depoliticizes them. Like, we need to do the opposite and actively politicize people by going and showing that we are willing to take the risk that they may not necessarily feel comfortable doing at the present moment. So ultimately, when it comes to undocumented folks, there are things that we can do, like going out and showing up, but there's also a lot of internal things that are kind of keeping people at an arm's distance. One of them is the overwhelming whiteness of DSA. That is a known fact. Everyone knows about it. Everyone talks about it. There are steps that we're taking, both nationally and also my chapter locally is doing when it comes to like Spanish, Vietnamese, Arabic translation, because undocumented people aren't just from Latin America. They also come from West Africa. They also come from Asia. And creating a space that is open and comfortable for people who, whose only experience of politics is the politics that, that made them flee their country. And yes, as Kristen mentioned, you gotta learn Spanish. You gotta learn a second language. I know English. I know Americans don't like learning second languages, but you gotta do it.
Thank you, and much appreciated. Next up, we have Ashik.
Yeah, I'll say a bit about two chapters that I'm familiar with, New York City DSA and Los Angeles. I think both have been doing pretty well on these fronts, like organizing in ways that connect with communities that include undocumented immigrants. Just to talk about Zoran's campaign a little bit, One of the core organizations that was part of his campaign from the jump, along with New York City DSA, is called DESI's Rising Up and Moving, DRUM, which organizes mostly South Asian, like Bangladeshi, Indo-Caribbean immigrants, like many undocumented who are like a core part of the working class in New York City. They've been organizing since I think right around 9/11, which is when, like I was a preteen at the time in New York City. Like I saw how just the Homeland Security apparatus tore up whole communities. Like I have family friends who like were deported or like self-deported before they could be targeted because they were undocumented. And DRUM is one of the organizations that's come out of that and really built a very strong base through labor and tenant organizing, community organizing, and they were just there from the jump with Zoran. New York City DSA. I think there are plenty of dual members of both organizations. So that's an example of DSA organizing the capacity to have a very strong electoral program that's going to stand up for people's rights who are being targeted, along with major labor unions that include plenty of undocumented workers. Like I think the things that help us show up for undocumented people are the things that make DSA strong, like as a party-like organization. So these are examples. In LA, like I mentioned, the targeting of MacArthur Park, which is a neighborhood that includes plenty of immigrants, like working class, like Spanish speaking, like lots of monolingual Spanish speaking people. So DSA has been working with that community, especially with their city council member, Inés Hernandez. And they see like her office showing up, they see DSA members like organizing in that community against the way that the right wing is really scapegoating. Like there's the whole right wing media apparatus that's obsessed with this one park as an example of like the left failing in a major city. And DSALA is helping build a base to show the alternative to that. So I think the way we tackle this is by building a strong socialist organization that people can trust to lead collectively on a bunch of fronts. Like we have to bring together state power, strike power, street power, like all together in our organization. So, undocumented people are very justified in having a low risk tolerance. Like we don't have to, like do join DSA asks, but we can grow DSA by doing all these things. New York City DSA has doubled their membership in the past year. DSA LA is growing really quickly in ways that reflect how diverse LA is. They have a high density of union members. These are all things that help us show up for undocumented people. It's by making DSA strong in all these ways and building trust that we're going to get shit done.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Sarah.
Yeah, I think that this is a really important question for DSA to think through. I think we can break this down into 4 parts. First, we must have something to say to the people we want to convince and protect. That means we need programmatic commitments that are reflected in every field of our organizing to the defense of undocumented people and immigrants. We need to call for the abolition of ICE, for freedom of movement, to overturn all discriminatory measures and laws on undocumented workers, and for voting rights for non-citizens. We also have to have a way to communicate that message to the kind of people we want to talk to. So that means translating our materials and putting them in a context and a framework people can understand them. I've said before, and I'll repeat, I think it would really be worth us considering whether we should hire a translator with this new upsurge of membership and fund we have. I think we should offer bilingual trainings for chapters. I think that our long-term goal should be to establish regularly producible materials and a basic standard of awareness of communication, at least in Spanish, for enough members that when we go out and canvass in heavily non-English communities, our message can break through. Lastly, I think it might even be worth considering if now is the ideal time to have a white girl from Portland who only speaks English as the comms co-chair. I love the position, but I think that it could be valuable to have a comms co-chair who speaks Spanish. Once we have this message and this position that we can communicate to people, we should be out there campaigning on it, drafting model resolutions for unions to pass in their locals and at a national level, and communicating them to our members. R&R and MUG have a joint resolution for the NLC that would help do things like this, advocating for our electeds to engage in non-compliance in every measure of stalling, stopping, and blocking these attacks on immigrants, sanctuary city resolutions for cities and sanctuary campus resolutions for campuses, and mass protests, mass mobilizations. There's tons of energy here. Lastly, once we've campaigned and once we've convinced people to join our organization, we need to protect the people who have joined. That means relentlessly fighting against chauvinism within our organization, both in its most pernicious forms, outright racism, but also in the way it leads people to not really think or care about these pivotal questions. We need to draw back from things that would be unnecessarily provocative and draw attention to our organization and our members without clear gain. We should stick it out even when we're facing repression, even when it's unpopular. And of course, we have to protect the data of our members. But most important thing we can do to protect people is build up a mass movement so that no one is stuck doing this alone. A mass movement through protest and the largest, strongest possible DSA to fight back against this deportation regime.
Thank you. Next up, we have Jeremy.
Thanks so much. I agree with a lot of what's been said, and I really, commend the South Florida Forum for focusing so much on this question, because I think it's just about one of the most essential fronts in our current battle against fascism in this country. I think others have covered really well a number of things. I think we should be experimental in our methods. Socialist parties in the past in U.S. history have had things like linguistic sections of those organizations, like multilingual sections or just sections in different languages, where there can be, an atmosphere where it's not just like there's some translation of materials, but actually a place where people are speaking their first language and everyone is speaking that first language. But I think those kinds of sections, one thing our experience is in New York is there's a tendency, I think, for when you start a subgroup, they often become a reading club and little more. And so, we have a Latino Socialistas group, which is a wonderful subgroup of NYC DSA, but a lot of times getting those subgroups in our organization to do the same organizing practices, external facing work, mass oriented politics that any other part of our organization would do can be a little tough, because when people start a group, they like to do readings. And I say first organize the masses, also for readings. That's one thought. Definitely showing up, as people have said, on the front lines of struggles with immigrants and with our undocumented brothers and sisters. Definitely recognizing the different security risks. And I'll say the last thing that came to mind in this question is I do think the higher the risks associated with the individual, the more I think oftentimes sort of like a left organization has to prove its worthiness of a person spending the time and taking the risk to get engaged in action. I think we should think a little bit, okay, are undocumented people, with all the risks they face, are they finding in DSA a home that it takes those risks very seriously, that, as Sarah was saying, doesn't do things that draw undue attention to ourselves, that don't have great political gain, that takes organizational security really, really seriously, that emphasizes mass action so that, people aren't standing alone, but that there are hundreds, thousands of people in any given action that we're taking. I think we have to prove by our organizing that the people with the highest risks can also have the most to gain from getting involved in our party. And I do think that finally comes to the point that was made earlier about playing to win, that when they see immigrants like themselves elected to higher office, when they see campaigns that are successful at pushing back fascist forces, they see DSA potentially as a serious home for their organizing.
Right. Thank you very much. Next up, we have Joshua.
Yeah. Hey, comrades. Thank you guys so much for everyone that's talked before. I think some really important answers. And I really want to echo Comrade Sarah's example of a baseline level of communication that we really got to put effort into. I think that's amazing and well said. So appreciate that. I think above all else, we got to be true to our values. DSA has got to demonstrate that our movement is based in compassion for all people. That compassion, which I think is a word that goes even beyond the idea of solidarity, that's what I want to fight for above all else. If you've seen the things that I've previously submitted during this run, or my video and anything like that. But We can't simply settle for words that we post online or that we say to others. We got to back up our positions with actions from both the national organization as a whole and from our individual members. Because we don't have the power to legislate in too many ways, our goal has got to be to create relationships and the basis for them that's rooted in trust. Member development and discipline are key tools we have in this regard. We want people in our communities to know that every DSA member is an honest, committed organizer whose goal is to help their communities rather than acting on their behalf. That also means demonstrating that the same values we discuss when we build towards power are the same ones we demonstrate in instances where we hold power. We also got to approach our communities with only the intention to listen and to help them. We got to employ the 80-20 rule and make sure that we're taking care and special effort to listen to the needs of our communities. We can only bring undocumented immigrants with us if we allow them to guide their own organizing based on the needs most deeply felt by them and their families. The issues that are important to them got to become the issues that are important for us to help them fight for. We can and must work to help bring intersectionality to their material issues and expand how we perceive these issues in the context of the wider political landscape. But all this must be based on listening to those who suffer under the oppressive steps taken by our government and helping them meet the needs of their communities. That's solidarity we got to pursue with all working class people, but especially so to those most vulnerable to the reprisal and punishment by fascist, racist, reactionary forces that we see today. And I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Cliff.
I've been thinking about this question a lot because we have members of my chapter who've had to take a step back recently, either because they're undocumented and facing higher risk, or because they're citizens but their family's undocumented and they just don't have time to deal with family emergencies arising from that and do DSA simultaneously. So this is really a pivotal question, like others have said. I think we need to keep in mind the history of deportation in this country with its roots in so-called Indian removal, where whole communities were moved out of their homeland, as well as the slave trade, where enslaved workers organizing for their freedom were broken up, sold out to other parts of the country in order to stop them from being in contact and organizing. And then, of course, the next place we see deportation deployed is against wage labor organizers, particularly here in Florida. In Tampa, for example, cigar factory workers who were organizing a union were kidnapped and deported to Honduras, where they were marooned in a rural area, and I don't think ever returned. Maybe one of them did. But anyway, we can look at the Red Scare and see people deported for their political views. We can look at the response to Zoran's win from the right wing, where people are calling for Zoran, who's a citizen, to be deported. So I would push back on the idea that those of us who were born here or are citizens are safe from deportation. I don't think that will be true in the long run. Sure, it's illegal, but we've seen time and time again that that does not stop our ruling class from doing what they want to do, especially under this administration. So I think there's a few things that we need to do, not only to bring undocumented people into DSA, but also crucially learn from them, because we are going to be dealing with some of the same problems, I think, as time goes on. So number one, Sarah talked about the program that our caucuses have brought forward. I think what's really crucial about this is our program doesn't only talk about what we need to do immediately, that is there, but it also imagines a long-term vision of what we're fighting for, which in this regard is a world without borders. That is our end goal, a world where deportations just simply don't happen, because they can't happen. There's no infrastructure for it. So that's number one. I think a really crucial flashpoint that we can focus on is political prisoner organizing, organizing to reverse deportations, as we've seen with Mahmoud Khalil and other examples. That is a place where we can really dig in our heels, I think, and start learning how to support undocumented folks. And I think as time goes on, DSA members facing similar repression. And we definitely need to build better relationships with the existing immigrant rights groups who are doing the work on the ground already. And, worker centers, unions, everybody that's doing this kind of work, we need to be building better relationships with them and learning from their tactics. So that, I think, is a good broad overview of some ways that we can look at building a DSA that can be a home for undocumented workers. I'll admit I don't have a really well worked out answer to this question. And I think that we need to come with some humility on that and admit that we have a lot to learn there, while targeting these political interventions that we can make to start cohering those tools. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Next up, we have Luisa.
Should I realize? Okay, sorry. So a couple things. One is, I was just having a conversation the other day with an immigrant friend of mine who's involved in organizing in Portland DSA, and we can't assume what people's risks are and what level of risk they're going to choose to engage in. So, for instance, with them, they said, when I was a green card, when I had a green card, I probably wouldn't have joined DSA. Whereas when I had a green card, my limit was I wasn't going to get arrested, right? So we can't make those assumptions about people's levels of risk. But I will say, I will, in terms of enticing undocumented people to join DSA as an organization, I will say I will take a page from. I'm a union organizer. I've organized lots of strikes, and so one of the things that Labor Notes likes to say is that your anger has to be greater than your fear, right? And so one of the ways that we mitigate people's fears are by doing KYRs, right? Know your rights. And so the idea is that, and this is, I do lots of KYR, train the trainers. The idea is that people there, they're already scared, right? The objective is for them to walk away from that training with more confidence in what they came in with, right? And we can do that as an organization, right? We have on the groundwork to be able to do that across the United States. Another thing is, when we do talk to undocumented communities, talking about imperialism and racial capitalism, you guys, when I was undocumented or when I was organizing, I'm sorry, I was part of something called, I don't know if it's still around, but the Florida Immigrant Youth Network. And these are like undocumented people, young people across Florida. And it was so depoliticized. It was so much focused on, please just give us a visa, because that is it speaks to the desperation, right? That you feel when you're undocumented. But again, as an organization, we can go beyond that, and we can offer the same political education that we show documented, like people who were born here, right? Those kinds of numbers. Another thing is that, I think Byron said showing up is important. People join when they feel like they're going to be protected by community, which is a big thing, but also having affinity groups. I'm part of Undocu PDX is really important. And lastly, I'll just agree with Jeremy that leadership and representation is absolutely important. Electing immigrants to the NPC, right, who have had these kinds of experiences is really, really, really important for an organization that, for anybody who feels like this should be a priority issue, which I absolutely do.
Thank you very much. And next up, we have Andrew.
All right.
Andrew Porter.
Yeah, sorry. I think people have already spoken to a lot of kind of the structural limitations and issues we're facing. For example, with the need to improve the amount of languages that our materials in, the language, the fact that most of our members only speak one language, myself included. So I think that we've kind of like shown those problems pretty well. One of the issues that I think connects to this issue, but also to a lot of other ones as well, is, as people were saying, people are going to choose to spend their time in a way that makes sense and is useful. So if people who are, whether they're undocumented or not, don't feel like DSA is actually making material impact or being a use of their time, then of course they're not going to engage. So I mean, part of that is finding what are the issues in our communities, like what are the things that we could focus on, and making sure that that's what we're working on. But then beyond that, making sure that DSA is a place of deliberative democracy as well. If people are interested in doing good work, there are a lot of other organizations they can be a part of. One of the things that sets DSA apart is the fact that people actually get a say in the strategy behind our campaigns, what we plan on, prioritizing what we want to do, and then helping to carry it out. I think that's one of the most important parts of DSA, making sure that the work that we're doing matters to people and that people have an actual say in it, because that's so much different than anything else that they get to experience. We also believe that the working class is going to be sort of not only the engine of change, but the people that are going to be in charge. So this is one of the places where people can learn democracy and learn how to kind of administer. So I think, people have pretty much laid out a lot of the barriers, laid out a lot of some of the solutions with working with communities, making sure that we are able to increase the number of languages that are being spoken, making sure that we're strategic about how we do it. But yeah, I also agree, like this is a question that is not kind of has a fixed answer, and we're going to have to work through to figure it out. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you all so much. That is the conclusion of our facilitators part of questions, but we're going to be moving into an audience Q&A. Before I start though, so I just wanted to note that we have gone over the kind of original time that we allotted for the for the facilitator Q&A, meaning that, I know there are some folks here that budgeted 2 hours to attend. It says here that we have 35 minutes for audience Q&A and then 10 minutes for wrap up and closing. I wanted to kind of just get a feel from the room here how people might feel about the idea of just uh, getting rid of the closing statements and instead just prioritizing over the remaining time till 7 p.m., taking audience questions. Do folks like that idea? Are there any objections? Okay, that sounds good to me then. So here's how it's going to work. A member will ask a question over Zoom by stacking in, and then candidates may stack in to respond. And it's going to be at 1 minute or less. We're going to be taking up to 5 candidate stacks per question, thus giving 5 minutes worth of candidates' responses per question if, that many people, get on stack to respond to them. I'm going to copy and paste these rules into the chat as well so people see them. If we've exhausted our responses to a question with fewer than 5 responses given, we'll simply move on to the next one. So please have your Zoom name changed in order to include your chapter so we can get as diverse an array of comrades asking questions. And I believe that's directed to our audience here. So I'm going to go ahead and send this long list of rules here. But what that basically means would be, it'd be stack question. I think it'd be good if people just write out what question it is. And then I think candidates could just say stack response. And for every one question, we'll take up to 5 responses. Everybody clear? Okay. No shame in asking questions. So yeah, please feel free for anybody in our audience here today, especially our South Florida comrades, to consider coming on and asking some questions to the candidates. I know you've got something. All right, Wes, please go ahead.
Hey everyone. Hey Wesley, he, him, Miami, DSA. So my question is, and I think this pertains for all 3 chapters here. As smaller DSA chapters, smaller, of course, relative to the nation, South Florida chapters may not feel as connected to national, quote unquote, national. So for the candidates, what do you see as the role of national DSA with its various bodies like the NLC and the GDC? And how do those relate to local chapters? And I'm going to post the question in the chat as well, Maria.
Nice, thank you. All right, first up is Cliff.
Yeah, so I've talked a little about resolutions MUG is bringing to standardized democratic procedures for chapters or to direct national bodies like the NEC to help local chapters direct particular campaigns. I'd also like to see really highly targeted dues share increases where we understand what financial goals a chapter has, like getting an office, and then target particular dues share, especially to chapters like ours in red states on the front line of right-wing repression. I've talked about doing organizer exchanges. My chapter does not have a long history of tenant union work, or at least not people that were there for it the last time we did it. I would love for DSA money to be used to fly down some Crown Heights tenant union organizers from New York to show us how it's done and help us build out a program. I think that that's a place that national can become more useful to local chapters. And I think that's just a really pressing question in general, is like the main complaint I hear from people in my chapter and others that are in smaller chapters is just, what does national DSA have to do with me? Where does that interact with what we do? We need for that to not be a question on people's minds. It should be obviously apparent the benefit that national DSA brings. So I'd like to see all of this and more, more staff time, more NPC liaison meetings with local chapters. All of these tactics need to be used to make our national DSA infrastructure useful to DSA chapters like yours and mine.
Thank you very much. Cliff did go a little bit over, but I know that there wasn't really a warning there. I'll just ask folks to please try to keep it to a minute. Also, with the system that was laid out here, I believe the idea is that it's the first 5 people that get in to respond on kind of a first come, first serve basis, meaning that we'd be ending off on Josh's response. Though, if nobody else stacks for a question, we could possibly hear some of the other folks that stacked in. But sorry about that, candidates. Next up, we have Byron, then Andrew D, then Ashik, then Josh. So Byron.
I think, thank you. I think in my travels around SoCal and also Arizona, which is predominantly filled, besides Los Angeles, predominantly filled with small and medium chapters, the biggest thing that is kind of a unifying theme is what is staff? Like the only time we interact with staff is like once a year, or we need something, but we get ghosted. That is a consistent pattern that I have seen throughout my travels in the past year, but also in my 8 years in DSA. If you're not a big chapter, staff just really doesn't prioritize you that much. They're kind of busy with other things. But also, this is something that the NPC members should be doing instead. The way I view national is very influenced by anarchist federalism. We are the connecting tissue. We're not the nervous system. National should not be issuing top-down commands where if you have to either jump or get off. Instead, where we're there is to provide resources, provide contacts, get people connected, and ultimately help flourish chapters, not become PSL.
Next up, we have Andrew D.
Yeah, I think that this is a pretty common experience, not just for smaller chapters. I guess my chapter is San Francisco. We're in like the top 15-ish in members. We have around 1,000 members, and like I think this is a pretty common experience here too, right? So it is like a thing where like the vast majority of people organize, and they organize only with their local chapters, and it's very hard to identify like the interactions that people have nationally. I think that the onus is on like the whole national organization to make that presence known, and it's not just like NPC candidates or NPC members, staff, but also the way the national committees and national organizing functions should be much more chapter facing. So we should be providing resources and things like that, but also the work should be, I kind of like building off the Byron was saying, like working to connect chapters together, stringing campaigns together that are coordinating between chapters. I think that's going to be the core of it. I think Josh might talk a little bit about this too, but like I think this is where the Growth and Development Committee I think can play such a central role. All committees should be like this, but like focusing on developing chapters and having like an actual presence in chapter spaces.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ashik.
Yeah, I've really felt this moving to Wilmington, North Carolina over the past 4 years while being in national leadership, like coming from one of the biggest chapters in the country, DC, to a chapter that has like less than 100 members. They really benefited from the touch points that they did get from the national org. They were briefly assigned a field organizer who walked them through some trainings, who helped turn things around really quickly. I'm going to drop a link to an article from some comrades in Richmond, DSA in Virginia, which is a chapter that was on the verge of totally collapsing by the end of like 2022, 23, and a meeting with the field organizer, just walking through some trainings about membership engagement, like organizing campaigns, helped them totally turn things around. They've been growing like really quickly for the past 2 years now. So, we have all these organizing trainings, like resources, committees like the GDC are doing great in a lot of ways, but we need more capacity to connect with chapters. Like I hear from, Byron about feeling like staff it hasn't been consistently useful. But I know like we've never had like a full-time organizer assigned to California in the past 4 years. It's just like way too few people. I think we've had four full-time organizers for 200 chapters. So, that's something we can change.
Thank you. And then finally, we have Josh on this one.
Yeah, hey comrades, thank you for the shout out, Andrew. I'm going to drop a link here to a resolution that I bottom line that the GDC Steering Committee just approved. This is a resolution that talks about exactly what I think we're looking at here in terms of, what is the relationship between chapters and bodies like the GDC. And this is something I want to build out on, other bodies in a similar sort of way. What this resolution calls for is it calls for us as membership leaders in DSA, as members, to come together and build a political vision, not just a political vision, but just a vision for how we develop membership through the DSA. Like, what does it mean to be a DSA member? What does that mean for us as chapters? How do we lead people through that? For us to collectively build something like that, and then for the GDC to put forward the effort in mentoring our chapters to make sure that every single member gets the same opportunities to be organized as every other member through every chapter, through every national body, through every local body. This is what we want to build out. I think this is a great example for what we could do. And that's sort of like how the relationship I want to see between national. Well, national is the result of membership building together, building something cohesive, and then employing that and helping chapters achieve that through all localities. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Thank you. With those five, I believe that is all the responses we'll be taking on this question. Sorry to the other folks that stacked in. Anybody that didn't get a chance to speak this time will get prioritized in the next question. Are there any other folks in the audience who would like to ask questions to the candidates here assembled? Especially, I'll also particularly shout out our Broward and Palm Beach comrades to consider, throwing their hat in the ring here. Alrighty, go ahead, Oscar. Oh wait, actually, so sorry. I just saw that Zach stacked in finally. I think for Broward reasons, I should probably take him first.
That's fine, yeah.
No worries. Sorry about that, Oscar. Okay, so we have stat question. The Broward Sheriff's Office, that's Broward County. Broward Sheriff's Office is proposing a $2 billion budget, a $2 billion budget. My understanding is Broward already spends the largest percentage of budget on policing of every large county in the country. Since 2020, abolition has fell out of popular attention and DSA attention. How should DSA organize against the against the police when they are the enforcers of fascism? Alrighty. So in this case, if I'm not mistaken, Luisa didn't get a chance to respond last time. Andrew Porter didn't. Sarah M didn't. So I'll take them first here. So I'll do Luisa, Andrew, Sarah, and I'll give an opportunity for any other comrades that didn't have a chance to respond the first time.
Sure, I'll go ahead. Yeah, I hate that every time we talk about abolition, it is at the sacrifice of an unarmed Black person that has been killed by police, but that is what it is. I will say that, now nationally the attention seems to be on immigration. At the end of the day, the reason why immigrants are so targeted is because of racial capitalism, right? The fact of the matter is, the private prison corporations in the mid 90s, we're talking about like CCA and Geo Group and stuff like that, GeoCorp, they realized that the prison population was going down. And so they said, let's make up a bunch of bullshit reasons to throw Black and brown people into cages, right? And so you had, with the rise of immigrant detention centers, which are just immigrant prisons, right? People die, the conditions are extremely punitive. You had the rise of three strikes, mandatory minimums, sentencing, taking away prosecutorial discretion. And so you cannot talk about immigration without also talking about abolition, without also talking about the fact that at the end of the day, it's the same old, crusty, rich people making money off of our suffering, right? And off of the suffering of our community. So understanding that they're two sides of the same coin. Am I at time? I'm sorry. I'll stop there. Two sides of the same coin.
Yes. Thank you. Next up is Andrew P.
Yeah, so, I think where we have electeds, of course, we should be working as hard as possible to get them to, take money out of the police's budget, put it towards, social programs, towards diversion, towards mental health. In places where we don't, I think then educating people in the city about how much money your city spends or town spends on the cops versus other priorities. If possible, running resolutions or referendums around the issue. But I think the thing has to be like finding the ways to move the money out of that budget and into other places. Of course, that's going to be difficult when you have the cops that are going to organize against you. But I think now is the time to educate people about what the cops actually are. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Sarah M. And because Cliff bowed out of the meeting for time reasons, I think we'll then take Jeremy C. and Andrew D.
So I think it is fair, and I think it's important to recognize that the mass abolitionist movement we built in 2020, and I don't just mean we in DSA, but like the whole left built, has faced enormous repression and has faced serious setbacks. And I think we need to talk about why and what happened. We built up all this pressure and momentum, but then we weren't able to achieve clear demands. And the result was that the momentum and energy we had didn't translate into the sort of gains necessary to sustain a movement. And so now people have been attacking the abolitionist position for what they see as rising crime when no police stations were really defunded. The elites kept doing exactly what they were doing. So I think we need to think about some demands that we can practically implement right now in power. And I think this is really relevant to Zoran. So 4 things, just to try to go really quick. We can slash bloated police budgets, establish a street response program, create elected community control boards with hiring and firing power, and open the police files to examine their misconduct in practice.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Jeremy C.
Yeah, I think this is a great question. And it's sort of, to me, the analog is sort of what I was saying earlier around immigration as well, which is there's sort of the short-term, immediate defensive work we have to do to stand on the line. Solidarity when people are being used or disappeared, building out a sort of more positive vision of how response to social problems is not a carceral one, but is a caring one and is a positive one, and that our social problems, what problems we have in a society are not, and individual bad actors who can somehow be fixed supposedly by police forces in the carceral system. So I think there's like an opportunity to do that. And one thing I think that's interesting about Zoran's approach has been to sort of open up an office for community safety as like a positive alternative to begin with, a different kind of vision of how we might address social crises.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Very sorry to say that a good chunk of that was we didn't hear some of it due to technical issues, but we did get you at the end there. Okay, then Andrew D on this one.
Yeah, I think this is a really important question and like really good point for us to like reflect on, right? Because I think that like this example of abolition is a really good case study, and I think a place to showcase where like it's really important for an organization like DSA, a socialist organization, to be principled and to be principled, and that means not just like when it's in vogue, when it's in fashion, like there's a lot of energy behind it that we're supporting, organizing for abolition and like messaging around it, but also that when it's not so in fashion, that should also be at the minimum a red line, right? Where where our organizing attention moves and shifts, that's like one thing, but like the question of like say standards for elected officials and things like that, like those should be clear principles that we uphold. I think like basic economic issues, like when we go out and campaign, are good in table stakes, but holding the ground on anti-imperialism and that relates to abolition and concretely opposing racial capitalism is we have to do that at all times, or else it's kind of hollow. This isn't just a moral issue, but it's also a strategic one, right? Like more cops, more imperialism, more capitalism. It's like it's all the same oppressive tools.
All right, thank you so much. Now we've reached the 2 hour mark. Normally I would want to offer to do one more question, but seeing as how we've had one candidate already have to bow out due to time, I want to remain fair to all the panelists involved. So I think, unfortunately, we'll probably have to wrap things up for today. With that said, oh, and thank you very much to folks that are putting some of their responses in the chat as well. But basically, I would just want to end things off at this point here. I think. Yeah, I guess we don't have any formal like closing statements. So I suppose I'm trying to think of like a good non-awkward way to land the plane on this one, but I think I might have just volunteered myself to eliminate that. So, all right. Thank you all so much to all of our candidates that were able to come through today. Thank you so much to Broward and to Palm Beach DSA for partnering with Miami DSA on this forum. I'm glad we were able to get into some topics like immigration, like abolition that have particular relevance here in South Florida. And I am really grateful that we were all able to get this done, and I hope that this can become a tradition as we do it for DSA and YDSA conventions with regards to things going on in South Florida. So thank you all so much. And yeah, solidarity, everybody. I hope you'll have a great rest of your nights. Oh, yeah, and feel free to send your stuff in the chat if you have any other things to plug or other stuff. Oh, and this will all be getting posted to YouTube shortly after, so we'll be sending that link out as well, for folks to check out. Okay, bye, everybody.